Welcome back to Concepts in Algebra. On this video, we're going to go ahead and talk about how to graph the solution set to a system of linear inequalities. That should have said linear inequalities. So let's go ahead and do this. I'll go ahead and move on over to that problem here. Graph the solution to the system of inequalities. X plus y is greater than or equal to 5. Y is greater than x. Y is greater than or equal to 2, and y is greater than or equal to 0. Altogether, these form a system of equations or inequalities. Go ahead and group those up right there. And let me put on a set of axes so we can start our problem. And it might actually help out to have a coordinate grid on here, so maybe I'll introduce that as well. Let me go ahead and label my axes. Always very important to label your axes. Here we go, X and a Y. Now, the idea here is to start by graphing each of the corresponding lines. So in other words, I will graph X plus Y is equal to 5. I'll graph Y is equal to X. I'll graph Y is equal to 2. And finally, X is equal to 0. This first one here, I could use the intercept method to graph. So whenever you have a linear equation given to you where you have all your variables on one side and all your constants on the other, it's a great idea to choose or to use the intercept method. In other words, let x be 0. If you do that, y is destined to be 5. And if you let y be 0, x is destined to be 5 as well. So I'll go ahead and plot those points on here. Maybe I'll use a different color for this. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's about 5 right there. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, next job is really to connect those 2 points, and we're going to connect those points with a line that is solid, because there's an equality here. This equality tells me that that's a solid line that's going to connect those 2 points. Go ahead and do that. And I'll go ahead and, maybe I won't label that, I'll just continue forward here. Now I'm going to graph the line y equals x. That, you should already know, is just a diagonal line that goes through 0, 0, and 1, 1, and 2, 2, and so on and so forth. So I'll graph that, and when I graph this, I'll go ahead, I have to graph this freehand here, because the fact is that I cannot graph this, I don't have a dashed feature on my graph pad here. So let me go ahead and just draw this freehand, and because it's y is strictly greater than x, it's going to be a dashed line. So I'll just dash this out. Then we go ahead and move into the y equals 2. And y equals 2, I'm going to go ahead and graph that. Remember, that's a y equals a number is a horizontal line. So I'll graph a horizontal line at height 2, and I'll do that in maybe blue. And finally, I have to graph x equals 0. X equals any number is a graph of a vertical line. I'll go ahead and graph that out really quickly. It's going to be at x equals 0. And now that I have all my bordering regions kind of graphed out, I'm going to lightly shade in the areas where they should be shaded, and then I'll talk about what we would consider to be the final solution area. So in the first equation there, what you're going to do is you pick a test point. I'm sorry, the first inequality. You're going to pick a test point. And let's see, if you pick 0, 0, so if you let x equals 0 and y equals 0, you would plug those into this inequality. So I'll just point at that and say I chose x equals 0 and y equals 0. The question is that greater than 5? And the answer is no. So our test point for our red line didn't work. So that means that the other side of the red line will be shaded. So this area, anything on this side of the red line is going to be a possibility to be part of our solution set. Okay. The next one, which is y is greater than x, again you'll pick a test point. So for y greater than x, I'm going to point an arrow at it. I'll pick the test point. You can't pick 0, 0 because that is actually on that gray dashed line. You can't pick anything on the line itself. So you have to pick something off the line. And a great point to pick is something like this right here, 1, 0. In other words, let x equal 1, let y be 0. Is it true that 0 is greater than 1? And the answer is no. So that means you're going to shade the other side of this gray dashed line. In other words, I'm going to shade this side of the gray dashed line. You can see it starts getting real messy here, right? Now I'm going to shade everything where the y values are greater than or equal to 2. And what does that mean? Well, it means that I'm going to shade everything above this blue line. This blue line represents y equals 2, so I want to shade everything above it. And then finally, I want all my x values to be greater than or equal to 0, so I'm going to shade everything that has an x value greater than or equal to 0, and that's dominated by this green line. That's the bordering region. So now you look at the area that has everything, all the shadings pointing towards it. I'm going to number these out just to kind of help us out here. I'll call this region 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's still some other ones in here. There's this one 9, there's this one 10, there's this one 11. Okay? And actually, I don't even think 11 is one. I think 10 and 11 are actually part of... Oh no, 10 is one. 10 is definitely one. And 11 is definitely one. Okay. So let's talk. Actually, I don't think 11 is one. It doesn't really matter. If you look through these, let's just look at area 1. Notice the green line here doesn't have shading facing it, so that's out of the running. Area 2, the red line doesn't have any shading facing it, so that's out of the running. Area 3, same thing. The blue line doesn't have any shading into it, so that's out of the running. Area 4 doesn't have any shading from the gray line, so that's out of the running. Area 5 doesn't have any shading from the red line, so that's out of it. Area 6 doesn't have any shading from the blue line, so that's out of it. Area 7 doesn't have any shading from the gray line, so that's out of it. Area 8. Well, if you look at Area 8, it has shading from the green, it has shading from the red, it has shading from the gray, and it also, remember, the shading from the blue is everything above that blue line. It actually has everything. So this is our solution region here. This entire thing is our solution region. There we go. I didn't even have to check 9 and 10 and 11. If you go to check those 9, 10, 11, you'll find out that 9, while it does have some of the green curves shading, and it does have some of the blue line shading, it doesn't have the red line shading, so I cross that out. And 10 doesn't even have the blue line shading, so I cross that out. 11 suffers from the same issue.